So welcome everyone. Welcome to the London Buddhist Centre. My name's Maitreyabandhu. Welcome, particularly if this is your first time coming online like this, visiting the London Buddhist Centre online. We're in this retreat that we're running, this home retreat. Many people have joined us. A lot of people on the retreat are new, so particularly welcome to anyone who's new, and a special welcome to anyone who's the first time they've tuned in tonight. That's really good. I hope you get a lot from it. I hope so. That's certainly the idea. I don't know how many we've got here now.
142.
Got 142 people watching at the moment all over the world. We've been having people tune in from everywhere, it seems. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the London Buddhist Centre. I want to say welcome to those of you who are on the home retreat. We're in the midst of this home retreat. I was teaching meditation this morning on Zoom with 380 or so people. And we're teaching newcomers meditation in the morning with about 200 people. So a lot of people are tuning into this retreat. And I've been hearing back, because it's run by a team, and I've been hearing back from the team members who've been running the breakout groups that we've been having. We've been having sometimes 2 or 3 breakout groups a day, just so that it's not just like a sort of passive, like watching telly, that you are able to interact with each other and share your own experiences and so on. And I've been struck, and we've been struck on the team by just how deep the retreat's been going. We've also got a Slack lounge where everybody on the retreat can talk to each other. And again, I keep on seeing comments there, a lot of gratitude being expressed, which is really positive in itself, and a lot of a real sense of that the retreat is going well and going deeper for people. Sometimes not always comfortably, but deeper to people. And that's really gratifying to see. Really gratifying to see. So one thing that we picked up is also some people already, this is Thursday, we're going to be finishing on Sunday morning. Some people are already wondering, okay, where do we go from here? And just to flag up, we're going to be doing a Life with Full Attention course based on a book that I wrote. As it happens, I always find it slightly embarrassing to say that. Anyway, it's based on a book. It is the book I wrote, and it's going to be a 4-week course with 2 sessions a week, and it starts on the 2nd of June. So we'll be writing to everybody on the home retreat about that soon, and you'll be seeing ads about that. And if you look at our online site, you'll see more and more information coming about that next course. So that's the thing I want to really recommend to you, is go on to that course, on the 2nd. It starts the 2nd of June. Yeah. Be really good to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about tonight is the meaning of life. And of course, when you see that title, it does feel, terribly grand, doesn't it? The meaning of life. It feels very grand. But for me, and I hope for many of you, probably all of you, well, it's one of those great questions. Surely it's one of the great questions. Where do we find meaning in life? Has life got meaning? What does meaning mean? For me, that's been a central question in my life, right since I was a child. And for many of you, it will be a great question. It's like those other great questions in life, like what happens when you die? What is the value of love? And so on. These are surely questions that we shouldn't ever get too sophisticated to ask ourselves. We shouldn't sort of think that we can get beyond. They're fundamental questions. And so I want to try and make my own little contribution to that remarkable and huge question, that question that I think is created by the fact of mortality. We human beings, one thing we know for certain is that we're going to die, and one thing we don't know for certain is we don't know when. That casts a shadow of both pain and, I think, meaning on human life. And it's that great fact of death and not knowing when we're going to die that makes human beings, makes you and I ask that question. So what's the meaning of being here? Does life have any meaning and purpose? Does my life have any meaning and purpose? And if you've got to a place in your life at times when you think it doesn't, it's a very despairing place. It's a very despairing place. I've got there in my life at times where I really thought that life didn't have any meaning, that it was just a sort of a mess, a chaos. And, I was really quite despairing, particularly as a young man. I was tortured by that thought. I mean, of course, the other thing is, if you try to live your life as if it hasn't got any meaning, if you try to treat people as if how you treat people doesn't matter, you will do a lot of damage to yourself and a lot of damage to others. I don't know about the meaning of life. I don't know very much, and none of us do. But you try living a life in which you believe it has no meaning and how you behave doesn't matter. If you want to test that out, you'll soon see that it really, really isn't in your interest. It isn't in anyone's interests. So, tonight I want to try and explore this massive matter of meaning, which, as I say, we mustn't ever get away from. Children have that question, and we mustn't leave that question behind. What's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of my life? How to live, what to do. So for me, my story starts with this. Just to say about the structure of the evening. So I'm going to talk for a bit, about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we'll do a meditation. Then we'll have a tea break, and we'll have a tea break in time for you to go out and clap on the care workers in the NHS and all of those people in the front line in this very, very difficult moment. So there'll be a break in which you can do that. Then we'll come back and I'll say a bit more, and then there'll be some time for questions. So do start putting your questions in the chat box, and Seb and Sanjay will sort of gather those together. And then tonight, as every night we're doing on this retreat, I'm going to lead us in a short Buddhist ritual. In times of uncertainty and difficult times, particularly perhaps, we need to turn to ritual as a way of discovering within ourselves or beyond ourselves deeper resources that we didn't know we have. That's what ritual's about. Yeah, we'll do that at the end of the evening. Yeah, so that's the shape of the evening. So yes, my own story, my own story with meaning, actually starts with my parents. It's possible my mother is tuning in. So hello, Mom, if you are. Really good that you can tune in, Mom. Possibly some of my very large and very noisy family are joining in as well. So that's good. So when I was 8, my grandmother died. My grandmother, I was very, very close to my grandmother. I found her, I remember really looking up to her even as a small child. And my memory, very early memories, is I used to wake up. We used to live next door, and I used to wake up and run round from my house to her house. She was always seeming to be sitting in this very dark sort of scullery with an Aga. And she used to always wear black, my grandmother, my father's mother. She wore black ever since her husband had died, I think 20 or 30 or 40 years before. So she always wore black. And she seemed, as older people do to the very young, she seemed like, as old as the hills to me, sort of ancient. And we had this lovely bond. I remember colouring in a goose on a colouring book, and I coloured it in bright yellow, and I didn't go over the lines. And she was very impressed with that. I seem to remember. She thought I had something. So I can't remember how old I was, 6 or 8, something like that. She died, and good on my parents. My mother and father decided to take me, possibly because I was so close to her. I don't really know, but they decided to take me and my brother, my next brother. I've got 3 brothers older than me, and my next brother, John or Johnny. We went next door with my parents to see my grandmother after she died. She was I seem to remember her on a coffin, in her coffin on the bed, or she may have just been in the bed. It's that very old memories. They're very like myths, aren't they? They're almost like parables in themselves. And And I remember looking at her, and that very strong sense that something massive has happened here. It was like some massive question had opened up in my life. At least that's how I think about it now. As I looked at her, I loved her very much, and it wasn't grief that I felt. I just thought, this is a massive issue we have here. I didn't think of it like that. You don't think like that as a child, but it seemed a great question. And I remember perhaps my father or my mother saying, I don't know, I think my memory is that one of them said, "Oh, she's asleep." And I'd seen my grandmother asleep on many occasions. So I knew she wasn't asleep. I thought, no, that's not asleep. And I think one of them said, "Oh, she's gone to a better place." And even as a child, I was terribly young. I remember thinking, I can't see that. I don't know. I just don't know. But that sight, well, it just sort of confronted me, even at that age, with this massive question of death. It wasn't even particularly my grandmother's death, it was death itself. And I even have a memory from earlier on when there was a period of time before my sister was born. I've also got a younger sister, I've got a large family. When my sister was born, before my sister was born, and when my three brothers were at school, a lovely photograph of them all a shoulder head above the other, all with their school uniforms on, going to school. They were all at school. My sister wasn't yet born. I remember following my mother around, doing the housework with her, holding the pledge tin and holding the duster, sort of thing. This is before my mother ended up working for the business, but that's another matter. And I remember bursting into tears, inconsolably bursting into tears. And I seemed to have, I remember being very happy and then suddenly bursting into tears. And I had this very strong sense that this would have to end. And again, it felt like within our human life, even when you're very young, you have some kind of strange knowledge of death. Yes. So that's for me where this great question opened up. And so often these great questions do open up as a child. Unfortunately, in the busyness of life, we often sort of close those questions, which is such a shame. But Buddhism, I think, is a working out of those questions. It's taking these kind of questions seriously and trying to live on the basis of those questions. Not coming up with glib answers, but really trying to live on the basis of those great matters. That's what Buddhism is. Yeah. So that's how my own journey started in these great questions. But of course, when you think of the meaning of life, is there meaning to life? You can't help but think of Viktor Frankl and his book, The Man's Quest for Meaning. He was he was in Auschwitz, that the most horrible, one of the most terrifying things that have ever happened in human history. Although, golly, we've been having wars, haven't we, for the last 100 years, and horrors abound in the human world. He talks about three possible sources of meaning. He talks about purposeful work. That can be a source of meaning, where you're not just living to get money, to do well, but you've got meaning that feels significant and that feels that it's valuable for you and for others, doing something significant with your life. I feel I'm very lucky in that way. I spend quite a bit of my time teaching, and it does feel like I've got purposeful work. So that's one of Frankl's possible sources of meaning, of purposeful work. His second is love. Yeah, is love, and quite, obviously in a way, but let's just say it as simply and emphatically as that love. Particularly, he means, I think, empathy, feeling for other people, putting other people on the same level of yourself, reaching out to others, caring for others. That is a source of meaning in human life. And then Thirdly, he talks about courage in the face of difficulties, that's a potential source of meaning in life. Courage in the face of difficulties. He said even if there is meaning in life at all, then there must be meaning in suffering. And this is a man who'd experienced and witnessed some of the worst sufferings of the 20th century. So yes, that was his three areas to look for meaning: purposeful work, love, and courage in the face of difficulties. So I've got my own three ways. I only kind of remembered Frankl after I'd thought about this talk. So I've got my own three ways, and I'm not trying to in any way compete with Viktor Frankl, but I had my own three thoughts. And I've got three thoughts, and I've got two qualities in which we can know whether we're in touch with meaning. Because how you find meaning is one thing, but how do you know it is meaning? What does meaning feel like? What do we mean by meaning is another. So I'll see how the time goes. Probably what we'll do is I'll do my three ways in which we can find meaning, our sources of meaning in life. And then we'll try and take that into the meditation. And then after the tea break, I'll talk about two ways in which we experience meaning, in which we know that we're experiencing meaning. Because that seems as important as anything else. So the first thing I really wanted to be make really clear is, and in a way perhaps this doesn't need to be made clear, but I thought it's worth starting with it, is that meaning is not primarily a theory or an ideology, including a religious ideology, including a Buddhist ideology. It's not to do with meaning. Can be found in ideas, undoubtedly, and it can be sort of kept in ideas, sort of held in ideas, but meaning is not primarily something that you read. It's, the meaning of life. I mean, what's that program? Guide to the Universe. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe. In that the meaning of life is 42, which was very funny, I thought. But it's a comedy on the fact of, as if meaning of life, there was an answer. The meaning of life is 42, is such and such and such. Is these words. So the meaning of life is never to be encapsulated in these words, including religious words. It's certainly not to be encapsulated and can't be encapsulated in ideology. So meaning is something you discover in life as you interact with it. Now that interaction is also an interaction, hopefully, with books. One of the treasure houses of meaning in human life is actually books. Some of us upstairs have been talking about War and Peace. I remember when I read it, there's just so much meaning in it. There's just so much meaning in it on every level. Meaning about war, about spiritual meaning, everything. But meaning arises in life through your interaction with life, including your interaction with ideas, with novels, with works of art, with the natural world, with your interaction with friends, with your family, with your work. Meaning is what happens when you meet life and try to respond to it. It happens when you meet life and it provokes you to reflect, to think, to question, to ask questions. It's so easy just to go through the motions of life and just do what, I don't know, your parents told you or the university assumed you would do, to just go through life without ever really touching life and making you think. This is one of the reasons why the experience of death, or for instance, the experience of a love affair breaking down, is very often what propels people into these deeper questions of meaning. Something that you've really put your value on, or some beloved person, either they leave you or they die. And it shakes your world and makes you question things that you may never have questioned. Is this a job I should be doing? Is this what I should be doing with my life? I don't know. I can't think of it. Is going to the pub every Friday night and talking about Boris really a good use of this life? Is complaining about your neighbour the good use of this time? Is arguing in your mind? Is that what I'm going to do? But it's often some hardship. It's interesting that Frankl talks about courage in the face of difficulty. I think this is my actual take on that. It's often in the face of hardship and difficulty, something that shakes you a bit and wakes you up to, hang on, what am I doing here? What's important? It's so easy to be sort of drawn away into the trivial or the tertiary, but what's really important? Yeah? So my first idea about meaning is it's found as you interact with life, not found in a theory about stuff, but as you come into contact with life, especially difficulty and hardship, and especially when you start to take responsibility for it. Especially when you start to say things like, I'm sorry, that was my fault. That's something I keep doing, isn't it? ... It's that time when you touch life and it makes you think, why do I keep getting into this mess? Why do I keep going out with these kind of people? I've been out with this person, but why is it I would get to the same place? How come I get into this kind of mess? Yeah, I'll say a bit more about that later. Of course, it's sometimes found in interaction with ecstatic moments in life, where you have ecstatic moments. Either fairly commonly people have ecstatic experiences in nature. I've had friends who've had experiences, very, very deep experiences in meditation, sometimes very, very early on, that have been quite beyond their sense of themselves and the world. Yeah, really quite beyond it. Something touching on the mystical. People have almost religious experiences looking at works of art. I remember having one looking at a Cézanne painting when I was 24, and that's made me go back to Cézanne again and again. Looking at a Cézanne painting sort of shook my world in a way that's very, very difficult to explain. So sometimes people discover interacting valuably with life, seriously with life in the best sense, not portentously, not super earnestly, but interacting with life. Sometimes they have aesthetic experiences of nature, of works of art. Sometimes they have experiences of love and empathy. Sometimes they have experiences of having to really take responsibility for themselves. All of these things are what grow meaning in our life. Yeah. Another really simple way of putting it is tell the truth. As soon as you start to tell the truth, you move towards meaning. And it's not easy to tell the truth. Sounds like it is. Oh, you just tell the truth. But we actually don't tell the truth to ourselves often. We oftentimes, we don't really tell the truth to ourselves. We have to work out what we mean by what we're saying to ourselves. We have to work out the truth of it. Yeah. So you could say simply that, finding the truth and living by it is how you discover meaning in life. Yeah. Just start by telling the truth about yourself, the truth about your experience. Find the truth and live by it. So gosh, time is moving on. So that's only my first. So I better touch on the others a bit shorter. So my second thought about meaning in life is, and this is actually a bit more difficult to explain. I think meaning in life is found by trying to work out the parable of your life. Yeah, to try to understand, understand the parable of your life. I don't know whether you've ever noticed this, but do you notice how often, almost always, whatever your friends do or your loved ones do, and very often what happens to them seems to be just like them, seems to be really quite in character. Do you know how often you say, oh yes, that always happens to them? They're lucky or they're unlucky or this happens. But so often you feel about other people that they rarely feel like they act out of character, do they? even your very close friends that you know very well, you rarely feel, gosh, I didn't expect them to do that. In fact, it worries you when people act out of character. And even the things that happen to them very often sort of weirdly suit them. Now you have to be a bit careful with that, because if you're not careful, you take that too literally and think that the experiences people have are created by them. What Buddhism's saying is there's some mysterious interaction between self and world. I've been thinking of it recently. I've been noticing it a lot recently, as like the actor and the play. That there's some kind of relationship with self and world that's a bit like that. Be a bit careful with that, because you can overdo that metaphor. But that what happens to you, that the life you're in suits the character you're playing, if you see what I mean. Keeps on underlining the character that you're playing. Now, it's really pretty easy to see that in your friends. You can see, that they're acting in that way. They're doing that again. It's very, very difficult to see it in yourself. Very, very difficult. One tends to think, no, I'm a free agent. I do what I like. I think my own thoughts. I'm not acting according to character. I make spontaneous decisions. I'm free. Actually, probably your friends think, yeah, you think that's just what you're like. It's just part of your character. They'll think of you like you think of them, that they rarely act out of character, that they don't seem, in a sense, very free. So how I'm thinking about this at the moment, and I'm taking a bit of a risk with this because it's just what I'm thinking about at the moment, particularly on this home retreat, is that your life is a kind of parable. It's a kind of story that you're telling yourself. And when you tell a story, you kind of edit out bits, don't you? And you draw forward bits. Bits of it you make something of, and are big parts of the story. Other bits of the story you kind of quietly edit away. So one of the things we can do is try to notice what the parable of your life is. And you're trying to be the hero of the parable of your life. Just to give you a very personal example, just recently, I caught myself, and this is a bit shameful, thinking, I'm the one that's doing all this stuff. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing all this stuff. Other people aren't doing so much. Now, often that's a habit I've got, had in my life. I can easily get into that kind of resentful thinking and slightly self-martyring kind of thinking. It's not all I do, but that is one of my habits. And those stories, they play themselves by themselves without you noticing. You get absorbed, you or I in this case, get absorbed into the story. But just the other day, I think because we're on retreat and I'm a bit more awake to that, I just caught it and I thought, why do I need to keep telling myself that story? That I'm the one that does all this stuff and is much pressed and much called upon and much busy, and other people aren't, and so on. I played that story since I was as long as I can remember. Why am I acting out that character? And how would that character change? How would they become the hero of their life rather than the victim of their life? When I was young, I saw myself as a victim in various ways. It's really not a good look, as a friend of mine used to say. It's really not in our interest to think of ourselves as a victim. So when you've got those stories, and I've had some very painful stories in my life that I've told myself, one of the meanings of awareness is trying to think, why do I need to tell myself this story? And if it was a story in which I became the hero of, I've got partly I've got Dickens saying that you need to become the hero of your own life, which I've always gone back to without having a strained idea about what the hero is or the heroine is. I think he's onto something there, as long as you don't take it in that strange, rather, sort of silly sense. But if you think of your life as somehow a parable that's unfolding, that's got its own pattern, and you're trying to, as it were, be the hero of it, the person who learns not to resent, who learns the lessons that the parable of their life is teaching them. I think our life means something. I think not only our life means something, I think everything we do, everything we say, and everything we think has an effect. It means something. I mean, I don't think that Buddhism says that. But what Buddhism says is something that I'd already had an instinct for, that life means things, that everything I do matters, that my behavior matters, that how I think matters, that what I do, what I say matters. I mean, again, if you don't believe me, try living as if what you say and what you do doesn't matter. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. Yeah? So if I think that what I do and what I say matters, what I see if I look at my life is a kind of parable, that it's like a story that I'm involved in. How do I make that story into a story of love and wisdom and courage and understanding and apology and truthfulness and generosity, rather than a story of poor me, or wonderful me, big me? How do I, in Dickens' term, how do I become the hero of my life? I think that's how you find meaning. And you have to do that. I have to do that, and I'm still trying to do it. 50 years after, probably more than after my grandmother died. So I'll say just a little bit about the third, and then I want to meditate, because I'll come back to this in the second half, because this is, again, I think a bit more, I hope, a bit deeper still, which is, and I'll need to caveat this, but meaning is to be found in something beyond you. Yeah? So my first point was meaning is to be found in a vigorous interaction with your life. Yeah, that's where it's found. It's not found in ideologies. If you try and take it from ideologies, you're very likely to make matters worse. Be very careful with ideologies. So it's found by an honest interaction, vigorous, honest interaction with life. Truthful to yourself. Do you know what? I really don't like that person. Truthful about it, and then how can I work with that? Yeah? That's the first way. Secondly, I hope a deeper way of trying to look at your life like a parable. If it was a parable, what is it trying to teach you that you need to learn? I feel more and more strongly as I've got older that we're here to learn something. I can't support that belief, but that's more and more what I think. And it's very difficult for human beings to learn. So look at the parable of your life. Look at everything that happens to you. It reminds me, somebody once asked Sangharakshita, the founder of this movement, how do I become like you? And he said, reflect on everything that happens to you. Reflect on everything that happens to you. In other words, discover the meaning of the parable of your life. What is it trying to say about what your life wants to be? Our life wants to be a life of generosity, of meaning, of value, of goodness. We don't want our life to be unmeaningful, mean, small, petty. None of us want that. None of us want it. You don't need me to tell you that. But my third area is meaning needs to be found in something beyond us. So I'll talk more about this in the second half. And I think Wittgenstein said something like that, didn't he? He said that the meaning of life lies beyond life, something like that. Put it much better than I can. We need to have some sense, and as I say, I'll try and unpack this a bit more in the second half. We need to have some sense that it's not just me. It's not just me and my small egotism. Do you sometimes feel that you're just sort of going round and round yourself? It's so boring. I've got all these catchphrases that all my friends in my community tease me about. You just think, God, that I said something the other day, and a friend of mine I live with upstairs, Matt, said, "That's so like you to say that." I thought, yeah, it's really, can we find another metaphor here? And actually, it's so like me to say a metaphor. So you can feel that, gosh, self is just endless and tedious. I think if you're honest with yourself, at times it really does feel like that, just endless and tedious. So you need something beyond that you can find meaning in. Of course, for many people historically, that's been God. I've never believed in God, but I think it's onto something. I think the instinct is onto something. For me, I find it a problematic metaphor, partly because people don't realize it's a metaphor. I think it takes me to all kinds of problems that I think actually are deeply problematic. But the instinct to think that there's something beyond life that gives meaning to life, I think it's an absolutely crucial instinct. But how do we train that instinct so it becomes something more and more robust, something more and more reasonable, not fantastical and not ideological, something more and more that we can feel that isn't just some sort of unsecured belief. Yeah? But look, that's enough of talk for a moment. Let's see if we can take some of that into the meditation. I'll lead us through a meditation, and then we'll have a break, and I'll try and say a bit more about finding meaning in something beyond us. Before the break, just remember, beyond is a metaphor as well. But I'll come back to that. Yeah. So let's set ourselves up to meditate. So probably you'll be sitting on a chair, you'll be sitting in front of your computer. We'll dim the lights in the shrine room here. And you might want to dim your screen, just so that you haven't got the light of the screen shining on your eyes. And once you're ready, closing your eyes. So you want to sit upright but relaxed. So you want your head nicely balanced on the top of your spine. And see if you can bring your mind into your body. So as I was saying earlier, meaning isn't to be found in ideas, or at least not in bright ideas, in sort of heady ideas. To find meaning in our life, we need to be more and more integrated, more and more complete, more and more unified. And the key to that is cultivating much more awareness of our body. Because the meaning is going to be growing out of our experience. It's not coming into our experience literally from the outside. So see if you can really bring your attention to the weight of your body on the cushions. Really feeling the contact of your cushions, of your body with the cushions of the chair. And as I often say, you don't need to think about that. You don't need to have any picture of your cushions or your chair. You just feel that sense of pressure, of support. And then once again, softening your eyes, your brow. We're very often furrowing our brow. And we often don't even notice we're doing that. So see if you can just soften your brow, soften your eyes. See if you can relax your jaw, release your jaw. See if you can let go of your shoulders. And see if you can soften your belly. See if you can let go of your legs. We're often gripping with our legs. So just imagining your whole body calming down, quietening down. Calming the body, calming your mind. And then bring your attention into your heart center. So I don't mean your literal heart, just the center of your chest. So you're aware of your body, you can feel your weight of your body. You're not trying too hard with all this, you're not laboring over it, you're just aware of your weight on the chair. To bring your awareness into the heart center. And just notice what you feel there. And a lot of people tell me they don't feel anything there. But even not being able to feel anything feels like something. What we mean really is that we just don't feel very much. It's very bland and neutral. And that's just fine. That's how we often are. So see if you can feel what you actually feel around your heart center. Even if that's nothing much, that's fine. And then all we're going to do for the next few moments is just turn over in our heart just those things that we value in our life just now, that give us a sense of meaning and value and purpose. And it doesn't need to be big things. It can be a novel you're reading, a joke you shared with a friend, someone you talked to today, enjoying walking in this beautiful weather in London. Things you appreciate, things you value. And all you're doing is bringing them to mind and, as it were, taking them into that heart area. You're not trying to make yourself feel anything about it. You're just remembering. I can remember my friends. And book I'm reading that I'm really valuing. I'm valuing the interactions I'm having with teaching. I've got children in my life that I value, etc. Just turn them over in your heart. And you're not trying to make too big a deal of it, just bringing your mind into the heart center. And just bringing to mind, what are you grateful for? What do you appreciate just now? What do you value just now? Simple things. And as you bring them to mind, just see if there's any response around your heart. Keep bringing your attention back to the heart. And if you find it difficult to feel anything there, just come back again to your body, to the weight of your body. on the ground. Just turning over in your heart. Just those simple things that you're valuing just now. If you get distracted, that's all right. Just come back to the weight of your body on the chair, on the cushions. Come back to your heart center. Whatever you feel there, even if it's nothing much. And then just bring to mind in a kind of light way things that you're appreciating just now, that give your life a sense of value and meaning. And then coming back again to the weight of your body on the cushions or the chair. Opening up to the sensations of your body. Opening up to the sounds around you. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes. Okay, so we're going to have a 10-minute break. We'll start again at 8:05, and that gives you time to run outside and clap. So what we'll do is we'll mute the computer here for a few minutes, and then I'll start again about 8:05. Yeah, so you've got time to do what you need to do and get yourself a drink, and we'll come back and I'll carry on talking about meaning and how we feel meaning, and then we'll finish with a ritual. Yeah. Okay, I think we're tuning in again now. Yeah, so we're back live again. Well, we were live all the time, but we're unmuted. So I'll say something more about meaning found in beyond you. In a certain sense, we're going to be trying to explore that in the ritual. That's what ritual is for. That's why human beings have always done rituals, is to uncover, discover, imaginatively apprehend a meaning beyond themselves, a meaning beyond their own egotism. That's what all rituals are really about. So we're going to sort of actually try that out a bit. But the one thing I was thinking about it that I thought I'd have a go at is that at the very least we know that if you try and make something you already have meaningful, it'll end up hurting you. So, for instance, if money is meaningful to you, if that's where you try and find meaning in amassing money, you'll never feel like you have enough. You'll always feel impoverished. If success is what you put your meaning on, you'll never feel you're successful enough, and there's always other people about to snatch that from you. There's always the new talent coming up to challenge your success. If you think that it's your looks, your beauty, your physical beauty that you find meaningful, well, of course, that's not going to last. If it's your popularity that creates meaning for you, well, that's not what happens when you're not popular. Yeah? So if we try and make something we have meaningful, I think it eventually will hurt us. Success is a good example, for instance. If you are successful, if you have success, and you try and that becomes your meaning, then you'll never feel successful enough. Of course, this gets more difficult because I think probably for most people, the great sources of meaning is work and family, rearing a family or work. For instance, my own mother, for instance, she had 5 of us, and that in many ways was her great life's work. I mean, she also had to work for the business, my father's business, driving coaches. She was the only woman coach driver in Warwickshire, I think, all that time ago. And she didn't really want to do that, but we had to because he had no money. Family, it's very often that we that's where we try and get meaning in family, and quite sort of reasonably and in a way understandably. But I remember my mother saying how difficult it was when we all left home. I've got girls in my life, Alex and Ria, and they've already got to the eye-rolling teenage stage, where they just don't need me around so much. So even things like family, if that's where you're going to find all your meaning, before they've left home. It seems to happen incredibly quickly. Or work, so many people come to Buddhism, come to some kind of quest for meaning when something's happened at work, when they've been laid off, or when they're furloughed just now, or a friend of mine has become redundant in this time, as many people have. So my own thought about it was that if you don't have a meaning beyond you, you're forced into creating meaning from what you already have, and there's something about that will eventually come round and bite you, sooner or later. Now that's easy to say, but that it's difficult to sort of understand to then discover a meaning beyond you. But I'll try and say that bit about that at the end. I want to leave enough time for questions, so you might have questions about that. But I wanted to talk about, so those are my 3 ways, and I wanted to talk about 2 qualities. mind. So I don't think genuine meaning can be found in something that you can't believe in, that you can't experience, even if only to a small degree. Hang on, there's a question. Oh, there's a sound issue.
Is the light still on the front?
Yeah, the light's on.
Okay, it's back.
It's back?
Yeah.
Am I back? I don't know how long I was away for.
Everybody lets us know, but you're back.
Okay.
Maybe rewind a couple of minutes.
Okay. So yes, I'll just try to explore these two qualities. This first quality is that the meaning needs to include all of you. In fact, it needs to include more than you. But you, for something to be genuinely meaningful, you can't leave a part of yourself out. Doesn't mean to say you naturally have to express it, but you can't leave a part of yourself out. It needs to find its place in a greater meaning. If you see what I mean. An aspect of that is it can't be something that you have to leave your reason outside. This was one of the reasons I always found God so problematic. I never believed in God, as I said earlier, but I just couldn't believe in it. I just couldn't do that. I just thought, I couldn't reason it. I couldn't believe in it. And I've read some great Christian thinkers, including Marilyn Robinson's recent book called Why Are We Here? She's a wonderful Christian thinker. And some people manage to find a way of making it reasonable to themselves, but I never managed to. But I don't think you can find meaning in something that you have to kind of cross your fingers to believe, that you have to edit out your experience to believe. It needs to be big enough to be able to meet all of your experience, which is quite a demand for meaning. But it needs to feel like I've got all the space in meaning that I need. Yeah. Now, my own experience is that the Dharma is the only thing I found that has done that. I have actually also found meaning in art and literature particularly, but it's never been big enough. It's never encompassed the whole of my life. So I think that's another qualification for meaning, that it needs to be able to contain all of you. You need to be able to reason for it. It can't be something that's fantastical or ideological in the sense of you can believe it and even be passionate believing it, but you have to leave out all of these criticisms of it, or you have to suppress elements of yourself that don't fit into it. I don't think that's very healthy. And so it needs to be big enough to include all of you. And in fact, it needs to be encouraging all of you into it, I think, and to live that. And then the second thing I was thinking about meaning is how do we actually experience it? It's all very well. The more you say that word meaning, it's like saying the word umbrella lots of times. You say umbrella enough, it just becomes just a set of noises. You keep saying meaning, eventually you go, what on earth is it? So how I've been thinking about meaning recently, I was just talking to, again, a friend of mine. I live upstairs with David. We were talking about it, and I was saying that my own experience of meaning is an experience of alignment, that I feel aligned with meaning. I don't always feel like I'm moving towards it heroically. I don't have that sort of sense of my life, but I feel at times, and at times even very deeply, really deeply aligned with something, as if, as if there's a gravitational pull, and I can start to feel the gravitational pull of meaning and value. And I can feel when I'm in that pull, and I can feel when I'm not. I was talking about dharmic responsiveness yesterday in the retreat, responsiveness to the truth. And I think partly this is what it's getting at, that sense of alignment with value and meaning. When you rise up and you do the difficult thing. I remember one time when I was young, having to go to criticize two of my Buddhist teachers about something I was concerned about. And I was very uneasy about doing it. I naturally look up to people, I think. I remember going to see them and saying, look, I'm going to have to, I feel quite critical of that. And I remember I thought I did it really well. I was empathic, I was sympathetic to them, I was understanding, I wasn't moralistic. I've come to really loathe moralism, moral indignation, moralism generally. There's always a new brand of moralism around. I managed not to be moralistic and blaming, but I did manage to say, look, I just don't think that's very good. I sort of experienced myself growing up in that moment And I remember walking downstairs afterwards, I remembered it all this time. I felt this lovely sense of alignment. It's almost like your spine is in alignment. Like, like when you go to an osteopath and they crack your spine, oh, I feel better. You feel like everything's lined up properly. The top is at the top and the bottom's at the bottom, and you're in the right alignment to it. Sometimes I felt that very deeply, that I'm aligned with meaning and value. I'm not, an embodiment of it. I'm not an exemplar of it. I'm very aware of my shortcomings, but I feel aligned with value and meaning, and it's quite palpable. You feel it. It's not. It has thought in it, but it's mostly a kind of feeling of a sort of positive, healthy pride, even that you're doing what you should do. You're living how you should live. It's very, very pleasurable, but it's pleasurable in a very quiet way. I think sometimes it's what people experience on retreat, that you're doing what you should be doing. The top is at the top and the bottom is at the bottom, and you're in the right place in the mystic order of things, almost like a spine running the way through the universe, and you just got your little place in that, and it all feels right. You know where you are in life. Yeah? It's very palpable. It's not an idea you bring in. And of course, you can sometimes really feel that you're out of alignment with meaning, can't you? Painfully out of alignment. You can just feel that you're lost. You just don't know what you're doing. For instance, when you lie, you feel immediately like you're being pushed out of alignment with meaning. When you're mean, when you're harsh to somebody, you're sort of pushed away from this alignment with meaning. Perhaps another way of thinking about it is again, I'm using alignment, and I'm using this idea of gravitational pull. So it's as if there's another planet, the planet of meaning and value of truth, that has its own gravitational pull, and sometimes you can feel that pull. But very often you feel very pulled in other ways, don't you? You know, that those times where you think, I'm going to do something valuable, then you end up just flicking idly through Facebook. You know, you're pulled into triviality. What's that? You're pulled into I don't know, triviality. That's the word. Thank you. Normally, I have lots of people who can fill my words for me. You're pulled into triviality. You're pulled into sort of just silly behaviour. You think, why ever did I do that? We're all subject to all these kind of pulls that are deeply buried in us. But there is also this pull towards meaning and value and truth. And when you're in the slipstream of that, when you're in the pull of that, the gravitational pull of that, you feel it. You feel it definitely. Anyone can feel it. It's got this lovely sense of relief about it, this sense of knowing, in a way, knowing who you are, knowing what you're about. Very, very satisfying. Yeah? So let me just finish by coming back again to meaning to be found in something beyond you. And what I was saying before of, this sense of the tedium of being you, saying the sort of things that you say, of doing the sort of things that you do, of getting into the same sort of scrapes very often, getting into the same kind of relationship patterns, all sorts of things. And how tedious that can be, and how sometimes you can feel it's difficult to get out of it. Even in meditation, even when you're a Buddhist like I am, you can find it so difficult to get out of. I do sometimes. Sometimes it feels like one is in the grip of the myth of being me. And I don't mean that in a positive sense. But I thought I'd finish my little talk, at least, by telling you about an experience I had in which I experienced something more, and something seemingly infinitely more. So I started this really by talking to you about my grandmother's death, and that great question that my grandmother's death for me created. And I could tell my parents didn't know the answer to it. Even as a child, I knew that they didn't know. And I knew that was a massive issue. And effectively, it stayed one of the issues of my life. When I was 30, I was ordained. So that's a long time ago now. It's nearly 30 years ago. In fact, I was ordained on I think the 2nd of June, so it's coming up soon. And you have a private ordination and a public ordination. Ordination, by the way, into the Triratna Buddhist order means commitment to Buddhism. It means dedicate. It actually means a bit more than that. It means that you've decided to dedicate your life to Buddhism, which is dedicating your life to meaning and value, come what may, dedicating your life to the Buddha, dedicating your life to his teachings, and dedicating your life to trying to create Sangha by being honest, by being kind, by making friends with people. When you're ordained, what's being said there is, yes, you can do those things, and we can see that you're doing those things. Of course, the great challenge of ordination is staying true to your ordination, because you take ordination vows when you get ordained, that you'll stay true to those things. And that's a lifetime challenge, to keep true to those vows you take at ordination. But there's two parts of the ordination ceremony: a private ceremony and a public ceremony. In the private ceremony, you yourself pledge yourself to committing your life to Buddhist practice, to discovering and uncovering the truth, whatever it turns out to be, the truth. And in the public ordination, you are witness of doing that in the company of a Sangha, in the company of the Triratna Buddhist order, in vivid relationship with each other, being honest, being kind, making friends, apologizing, forgiving, all that we need to do in our relationships with others, and out of which can come one of Viktor Frankl's basis for meaning, that love that can come from all of that, from relationship. Anyway, after I was privately ordained, in those days you used to be left on your own after the ordination, all night. And I'd written my own ritual. We're going to be doing a ritual in a moment. I'd written my own ritual, and I decided after my ordination that once my preceptor had gone, I would read this ritual out that I'd written. And it wasn't very good, the ritual. It wasn't a beautiful piece of poetry or anything like that. All I said in the ritual is, thank you to this person, thank you to that person. Here's what's been valuable to me. I just ritualized my life, the parable of my life, you could say, to go back to that. And I read it out, very much in pretty much my ordinary set of mind. And then I closed my eyes, and as soon as I closed my eyes, gosh, how can you put? There was meaning, and it wasn't an idea. It wasn't a thought. Wasn't even a vision, quite. Although you could say it was a vision. I'd moved quite beyond myself and quite beyond the world, in which everything in that experience was perfect, or at least what we call perfect. Perfect is really a Christian word, I would think. But nothing could possibly go wrong in that state of mind. I can never explain it. I can't really remember it. What I remember of it is it felt like I had this metaphor for it very immediately, and I didn't come up with that. It just appeared. So often metaphors tell you more deeply about life, as deep as language can go anyway. It was like a very kind figure had touched my shoulder and had shown me that I'd been looking down the telescope of my life the wrong way round. It really felt like someone had just taken this telescope out of my hands very kindly and just turned it round and showed me not just my life, but life, experience, reality, showed me it just as it is. And you can't say anything about it. You could say it's beautiful, but that's a bit weirdly trivial. But it was everything, it was everything. Nothing could ever possibly be a problem. No problem was possible, including death, in that experience. It was a vision of how things really are. And that vision closed. I'm not making any claims for myself. That vision closed, and I just went back into my boring old neurotic old self, the habitual self that I was in the moment before it happened. It was as if the doors closed on that experience and I was back to me again, boring on me again. But yeah, I can't gainsay that experience. It's an experience I definitely had. An experience of meaning itself as a living force in and around and everything. Yeah. Anyway, so I thought I'd finish with that story. I don't know what you can make of that, and now just open it up for some questions. If you've got any questions, and then I will finish as usual by just doing a short ritual, because ritual's one of the ways in which human beings open up to meaning from beyond themselves, beyond their egotism, beyond their everyday consciousness.
Yeah, so we've got this question from Adriana. She's asking about how that sense of meaning can be very vivid and true, but then vanish mysteriously. So she's asking how we can turn back to it.
Yeah, it's a good question. People can have experiences of meaning that are vivid and true, and then it seems to disappear. How do you turn back to it? The main answer really is put yourself in conditions in which you're more likely to experience it. For me, the sense of meaning waxes and wanes a lot. You can feel it very strongly, and sometimes you can feel like you don't feel it at all. And of course, we mustn't get too hooked up in it as it being a big experience. The sense of meaning can be very, almost every day. You can sometimes hardly know it, but you're living on something that you're not quite aware of. But where I feel it more, particularly, is when I go on retreat. When I put myself into conditions in which foster meaning, when I'm meditating, when I'm not on my phone all the time, when I'm in friendship with other people, when I'm in community with other people, when I'm studying the Dharma, when I'm trying to think deeply, when I'm reading well, when I'm in direct contact with nature, all those things foster an experience of meaning. You can have an experience of meaning in the most bizarre situations, including in very painful ones, but clearly certain conditions foster meaning more than others. I think the other thing I think is communication. Truthful communication fosters meaning in my life very much. But yes, it does wax and wane, and one of the things that we need to do is, if you start to feel that meaning is running really thin in your life, or what I'd normally say is you need to get on retreat, or you need to deepen your meditation, you need to take that into your meditation, you need to start to study the Dharma more deeply. I think we need to be quite sensitive to when we're starting to lose meaning in our life, because then we start to act foolishly. Then we start to find meaning in success or beauty or popularity or some other form. We'll try and find, some people try and find meaning in food or wine, and deep within yourself, that's not it. So I think one of the things we're trying to watch out for is when our sense of meaning is starting to thin, and we need to try and do something about that pretty quick if we can. And that's one of the purposes of Sangha, of a Buddhist community, a spiritual community, is hopefully you've got people around you to remind you, look, you're getting a bit thin on the meaning. You're getting a bit thin on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Raquel asks, do you believe that we're more immune to negative pull when we're more aligned, or the negativity comes just as often, and it's just a matter of responding differently?
Yeah, that's really good. That's a really good question, Michelle. Yeah, so I think when you're aligned with meaning, I think yes, you are protected from negativity more. You know this yourself, that when you're in a good mental state, difficulties can come if it's a genuinely good mental state, not just a intoxicated mental state. Because remember, a good mental state isn't necessarily a happy one, isn't necessarily a cheery one. Sometimes that's just sort of a kind of triumphant state when you think where you've basically just got what you want. But when you're in a genuinely positive state, you're kind of more insulated from your own negative tendencies. And we've all got negative tendencies. When you're in a genuinely positive state, when you're aligned with meaning, you feel yourself to be safer in the universe. I remember once I had this conversation with somebody that was actually, frankly, very, very difficult. And he was trying to trap me in a communication where he was trying to blame me for something. It was a very striking experience I had. And it was quite unpleasant and quite manipulative. He was trying to make me try to blame me for something. And I happened to get myself into a place where I was really quite mindful. And normally when people try and trap you, usually you just jump in the trap because you feel threatened. And I just didn't do that. I didn't jump in the trap. I felt somehow protected by being in meaning and truth. I kept on just telling the truth. And because I kept on just telling the truth, but doing so with this empathy for him and concern for him, I felt like wonderfully sort of safe in a certain sort of way. But yes, you're right that feeling aligned with meaning does protect you from negativity. It won't necessarily protect you from negativity coming to you from outside, because not everything that happens to you is to do with your mind by any means. But it will help you respond more creatively to it. In the Buddhist tradition, the metaphor they use is, if you want to, in carpentry where you put a peg in a joint, if the peg has got rotten, how you knock it out is you knock in another peg. So the way to knock out lies and deceit is to tell the truth. The way to knock out being mean or selfish is to be generous. It doesn't usually work to just try and not do the mean thing. You have to do something. You have to knock in another plug. The way to manage feeling that you haven't got meaning in your life is to open yourself up to meaning. It's to read Viktor Frankl. It's to open yourself up to meaning. It's to read Dharma. It's to meditate. Yeah? It's not usually enough just to try not to do the negative things. You need to put in a positive. And a key way of doing that is this sense of alignment with meaning and value. It's a very good question, Michelle.
Yeah, so Anna asks, how do we balance learning from this notion of the parable of our life with the potentially narrow and limited views of ourselves that some of us might have? She says, i.e., a parable isn't the whole story.
No, although nothing's the whole story in a way. How do we work with this sort of parable of ourself? So what I'm trying to say about that, I think, is suggestive rather than literal. Most valuable things are suggestive, really. Do you get what I'm getting at? That I'm suggesting something. I think the best attitude to have to your life is that you yourself have things to learn from it. That the scrapes you get yourself into are there for you to learn something. Yeah. Now that's not saying that they are necessarily. It's not saying that difficult things happen to you and that's somehow God-given for you to learn from. But that's the most creative, productive attitude to life. So when you get into those situations where, I don't know, you feel that you've been worsted in an argument, or you feel that you're not valued, or you feel that you're overlooked, or you're not appreciated. We all have those sort of stories. I can fall into those stories. As soon as you get into who's to blame for that, usually that gets you nowhere. In fact, I've never seen it get me anywhere. I've never seen it get anyone anywhere, including blaming yourself. But if you think, if this was happening to me in a parable, how would I learn? What would the parable be telling me about how to live? So I don't know what that means about a narrow view of yourself. It's so difficult with a narrow view of yourself, because I think we all have a narrow view of ourselves to one degree or another. I mean, this figure behind me represents the broadest possible view you can have of yourself. we all effectively get in our own way. So the thing is, we notice some ways we do that, but don't notice others. We notice how our own self-dislike gets in our way, but we often don't notice that we're also actually not very generous. And we might say, well, that's because I don't like myself, but that lack of generosity is getting in the way as well. That's narrowing us as well. I definitely grew up with a lot of, sort of self-dislike. Actually, I had quite a lot of dislike of others as well, which I was much less keen to admit because you didn't get sympathy for that. But I had quite a lot of self-dislike. I was much more willing to admit that. And that definitely narrowed down my experience. I was very lucky to have friends who wouldn't relate to me on that basis. Again, so much comes back to friendship. But yet, I think we've always got a somewhat narrow sense of ourselves. And what you hope as you grow older, and this isn't by any means going to happen, because if you don't actually work with your mind, you hope that you keep on opening yourself up and learning things. I've been striking in this lockdown period, I've been learning a lot of it from Sanjay about how to do this online thing. And Slack, I've never heard of it till it meant something else until recently. Now, those are sort of trivial learnings, but think of your life as something that you're really involved in, and that things that are happening to you, you're co-creating in some way. I know that's a difficult thing to say and a difficult thing sometimes to hear, especially if you're very unhappy. And golly, I've been very unhappy in my life, so it's not coming from because I'm Mr. Cheery Chops. Try to have that thing. What is my experience trying to teach me? Sometimes it might be teaching me that when I get in this state, I isolate myself because I feel unfit for human consumption. I need to ring a friend and tell them that I'm not in a great state, and so on. I hope you see what I mean. But I think that's a much better attitude to have your life, and assume that, yes, you're narrowing yourself. Yeah. Even when you're in a really good state, there's much, much more to you than you think. There's much more to all of us than we think. And that's what this figure represents. So perhaps one more before we do the puja.
So there's lots more, but maybe but there's a couple about ordination, so it might be good.
Yeah.
So one person saying, curious about the teachers, and well, they kind of want to know about the whole process.
Right.
They're asking about, do you choose your name? How do those names come about? Can you be married? And does the family move into the community house? And then somebody else is asking more directly, if you're thinking about becoming ordained, what would be the process to follow?
Gosh, that's great. Really good questions. Crikey, I need to sort of try and answer them. So yes, you can be married, absolutely. Yes, you can have a family. No, the family doesn't have to move into a community house. In fact, very, very few people live in a community. One of the problems about for me teaching, and in this particular context, is that many of us, because we live on site in these Buddhist communities, it gives you this sense that most Buddhists are living in communities, because I'm talking to you quite a lot. And Yanavarcha, he lives with me, Subhadramati, Gauravati, she lives in the community. Suragupta, the chair of the centre, doesn't live in the community. I don't think she ever has. She has a son that she lives with. She hasn't moved him into a community either. She is very much an order member and is the chair of the centre. So absolutely, you can have a family, absolutely. And there are order members who do have families, very many. You can be married and so on. So let's just be very, very clear about that. You can have a partner, you can have more than one partner. What ordination really is saying, you want to dedicate your life to the Buddhist path, which is a movement, which is a path from where you are now, just now, on a Thursday evening, to enlightenment. You've decided yourself, completely freely, without any pressure from anybody else, that's what you want to dedicate your life to. Now, ordination doesn't just mean that. It also means other people who know you well, particularly other order members, other members of the Triratna Buddhist order, they also think that that's what you really want to do. Now, this is a very inexact science, because you can think you want to do that, and actually it turns out you don't really want to do that. Or you can think you don't want to do that, and it turns out you do want to do that. And you can get that wrong, and your friends can get that wrong. And of course, remember, you can always fall away from ordination. It's not, ordination isn't a status. It's not something, okay, I'm now an order member and I never fall back from that. I've fallen away from it myself at times. Every order member does. So just to talk about the name briefly, so my name is Maitreyabandhu. Maitreya means the kindly one, and Bandhu means friend. It's a Sanskrit root of the word brother, for instance. You can almost hear the relationship of Bandhu and brother. It means brother in the sense of a friend that won't leave you. You're a blood brother. You're in that sense. So it means someone who's like a brother to you, a friendly friend, a friend who's like a brother to you. And I was given that name by the man who ordained me, Suvadra, someone I look up to very much. And he gave me that name. And it's sort of, it's like saying, this is your name when you're a Buddha. You're a bit like this now. You've got some of these qualities. In fact, they're even perhaps some of your strongest qualities. And you need to live out those qualities more and more until when you're a Buddha, you're going to be called Maitreyabandhu. Yeah. Now, I am definitely not a Buddha. But you see, that's the meaning of the name. The name becomes your path towards wisdom. So jnana vacha, for instance, jnana means wisdom, vacha means speech. So, and speech is very connected with thought, with reflection. So it means he who thinks and speaks and lives for wisdom. And you can see him living that out. I've seen him, I've known him since his very early days in the movement. I've seen him living out that wisdom voice more and more in more and more elements of his life. Yeah. So that's, the name is given to you, and it represents you at your best, and it represents your journey from who you are now to enlightenment. And when you're an enlightened Buddha, there'll be one called Jnanavacha, as it were, suggestive, and there'll be one called Maitreyabandhu. And we'll be quite different Buddhas, yeah? Quite different Buddhas. And then if you're thinking of ordination, my suggestion to you would be hesitate. That would be my hot suggestion to you, is hesitate. It's a very, very serious commitment. And it's a commitment that amplifies your life. So when you get ordained, if you do good, that is amplified. In fact, you can do more good, I think, if you're ordained, if you practice, because ordination doesn't do anything in itself. You have to actually live up to the ordination. If you live up to the ordination, you do more good. If you fall away from the ordination, I think it's quite serious. And everybody falls away from their ordination, more or less, for more or less periods of time. But your actions are amplified. So if I do something very negative now, my actions are amplified. So my suggestion, if you're thinking about ordination, is to hesitate, to talk to your friends about it, to ask them, is this a good idea? To make sure you've gone on retreat. Make sure you become a mitra first and see what that feels like. Becoming a mitra in Triratna means that you want to get more involved. You're not saying you're going to commit yourself yet. You're just saying, I like this. I think I'm a Buddhist. I feel I'm a Buddhist. I want to explore that a bit more. And I want to actually do that in a way. I want to take that seriously enough to do a ritual around that. But I'm not saying I'm committing my life to it. I'm just saying, yep, I think I'm a Buddhist. I think that's what I want to be. I want to go further with that. So I would do that first, because you can step back from that much more easily. And I've got friends who've stopped being mitras, and it's just fine. They're still good friends of mine. I've got order members who've resigned from being an order member as well, and they're friends of mine still. Have I? Anyway, I'll think about that later. But it's a very, very serious thing. So my suggestion to you would be to hesitate, ask your friends, definitely make sure you've gone on a longer retreat, become a Mitra first, really get to know the writings of Sangharakshita, the founder of this movement, because it's his ordination you'd be taking on. So you're actually getting closer to him. But look, I know there's lots of other questions, really, really good questions. Thank you very much. I really love questions, actually, and I'm in danger of going on too long. So let's finish with this threefold puja, this ritual. If you're new to ritual, that's great. Just jump into it, I would say. It's very short, and what I suggest you do is you just close your eyes in the ritual. You might even want to do this gesture, which is basically a prayer gesture, isn't it? And that's always meant, human beings have always done that in every faith, to say, is there something out there? Remember, out there is a metaphor. So there isn't somebody, as far as my belief says, there's not somebody, that I can phone up that's out there. It's a metaphor for beyond my everyday consciousness, beyond the tedium of me. Open myself up to, I don't know the world, I don't know the universe, what would I know? Let's just put our hands together and act as if there is forces in the universe that I can open up to. Let's act as if, let's play that, let's try it out. So what we'll do is we'll start with the first verses of the Dhammapada, which Seb will read. So you'll hear those verses. These are probably as close to the Buddha's teaching as you can possibly get. We'll listen to those. And then we'll do 3 short verses in call and response. So I'll say the line, and then you just respond. And try it out. It's not a spectator sport. So try it out. If you're at home and you've got your flatmate in the room next door and you're a bit embarrassed, just mumble it under your breath. That's fine. And then we'll finish with the Shakyamuni mantra that Sanjay will lead. And then we'll make offerings as the mantra goes. And then the mantra will die away and we'll just sit quietly for a moment. I'll say my goodbyes, as it were, and I'll point you to it now. The next thing's tomorrow. And then we'll just put the candles out, and I'd suggest you just pop down the lid of your computer and leave it at that. Let's just turn everything off after this. Just to say before I do all that, I'd forgotten that, yes, first of all, I just really wanted to thank so many of you who are on the home retreat for giving. We've already got halfway to our fundraising target for the retreat. I mean, those of them in finance have worked out that a retreat like this, if we were doing it, would probably raise about 20,000, something like that. So we've already raised £10,000 on this retreat from the people on the home retreat. So the main thing I want to do is really thank you all for doing that. It's very, very heartening, and it means that we can keep on giving the Dharma. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't individually thank you, because we'd actually really, really need the money. We've got a very, very big shortfall that we're looking at. And let's keep on. If you haven't given yet, do give so we can meet this target. But not so we can meet the target really, but just so we can use that money to do more of this kind of work, and that we can put it straight back into the Dharma. None of it goes to me, none of it goes to Seb or to Sanjay. Seb's taken a week off work to do this. That's Sanjay. Seb, anyway, that's another matter. So if you haven't given yet, do give. That would be really, really good. We could really do with it. And as I say, we're halfway there. Yeah, we're halfway there. Okay, so let's close our eyes, and then in a moment, Seb, not Sanjay, Seb will read the first verses from the Dhammapada, hearing the voice, the words of the Buddha, effectively.
Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox drawing the cart. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows like a shadow that never departs. Those who entertain such thoughts as, they abused me, they beat me, they conquered me, they robbed me, will not still their hatred. Those who do not entertain such thoughts as, they abused me, they beat me, they conquered me, they robbed me, will still their hatred. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in the world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. Others do not realize that we are all heading for death. Those who realize it will compose their quarrels.
Threefold puja, opening reverence. We reverence the Buddha,
We reverence the Buddha,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the shower of the way.
the shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma,
We reverence the Dharma,
the teaching of the Buddha,
the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha,
We reverence the Sangha,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
that inspires and guides.
that inspires and guides.
Reverence to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha
We reverence the Buddha
and aspire to follow him.
and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
The Buddha was born as we are born.
What the Buddha overcame,
What the Buddha overcame,
we too can overcome.
we too can overcome.
What the Buddha attained,
What the Buddha attained,
we too can attain.
we too can attain.
We reverence the Dharma
We reverence the Dharma
and aspire to follow it
and aspire to follow it
with body, speech, and mind
with body, speech, and mind
until the end.
until the end.
The truth in all its aspects,
The truth in all its aspects,
the path in all its stages.
the path in all its stages.
We aspire to study,
We aspire to study,
practice,
practice,
realize.
realize.
We reverence the Sangha
We reverence the Sangha
and aspire to follow it,
and aspire to follow it.
the fellowship of those who tread the way,
The fellowship of those who tread the way,
as one by one.
as one by one.
We make our own commitment,
We make our own commitment.
an ever widening circle.
An ever widening circle.
The Sangha grows.
The Sangha grows.
Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer flowers.
we offer flowers.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Our bodies too, like flowers,
Our bodies too, like flowers,
will pass away.
will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer candles
we offer candles.
to him who is the light.
To him who is the light,
We offer light.
we offer light.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
From his greater lamp, a lesser lamp we light within us.
The lamp of Bodhi,
The lamp of Bodhi,
shining within our hearts.
shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer incense.
we offer incense.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air.
The fragrance of the perfect life,
The fragrance of the perfect life,
sweeter than incense,
sweeter than incense,
spreads in all directions
spreads in all directions
throughout the world.
throughout the world.
Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha
Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. 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 Okay, good. So that's all we've got time for today. Normally at this point I say put your cushions and mats away in the corners and I'll see you next week. But yes, tomorrow as usual we'll start with meditation at 7 a.m. with Subhadhamati. And if you're familiar with meditation, you can join me at 8 a.m. And Garavati is not very well at the moment, so Subhadhamati will carry on at 8:30 teaching newcomers. And then again, events all the way through the day, the program as before. So do join us tomorrow for the continuation of the home retreat. It's going really, really well, the home retreat. So well done, everyone. And I'll see you very soon, I hope. So I'll just ask Seb to start putting out the candles, and then I'll suggest as we do that you just put your laptop down and come off the screen for tonight.